Hi, my name is Steve Yaw. I'm the Sports Information Director at Sacramento City College, and today I'm being joined with our Athletic Director and Kinesiology Health and Athletics Dean, Mitch Campbell. Let me first start off by saying that I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy as we navigate these unprecedented and challenging times together. So Mitch, I appreciate you taking the time. I just figured we'd get together and kind of do a little bit of Q&A. Obviously there's been a lot that's changed over the course of, dating back to our spring seasons when the 3C2A, our governing commission, canceled spring athletics altogether. And as we are now kind of into summer, as you will, with what's going on in terms of fall preparation, spring preparation for next year. So appreciate you taking the time and joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Yeah, it's been quite a time, and echo your sentiments first and foremost relative to everybody staying safe and healthy, and trying to find our best way forward.
No, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and get started. First question I had was, how have the coaches responded to the downtime, and have student athletes been able to stay involved with their teams in any way?
Yeah, it's really been a incredible occurrence. Obviously, foundations were shaken for many of us. I think it was Friday, March 13th. Actually, we had a baseball game, as you know, on Thursday, March 12th. That came to work that morning. Was thinking about potentially having to play the game without fans. And before the night was through, all of the spring sports seasons had been canceled. So it definitely was a shockwave for myself and everybody else. And answer your question, I've been really heartened, really encouraged in terms of the attitude that our coaches and staff have taken. And from the start, it was really a message of engagement and trying to stay engaged with our student athletes and with each other. We went online immediately with all of our classes, including our athletic classes, which isn't maybe the first thing you think about that would happen, but it did happen, and it has allowed our coaches to stay in contact with each other. And certainly what we're doing today, the Zoom meetings and all of those other ways that you find quickly to stay engaged and involved, have taken place. So I've been real encouraged with our ability to keep that as well as possible under the circumstances.
Great, yeah, and I know based on my limited interaction with the staff and the coaches, they are very much engaged, and obviously the student athletes is, number one priority in all of their minds, as well as we, again, charter through this together. Kind of to piggyback off of that, without the competition or training that's been able to take place on campus, what's been the focus of the athletic department? I mean, obviously me and you are entrenched in it daily, but from the outside, the eyes looking in, a lot of it is the games and the practices and the competition. And so without that taking place, as we went through the rest of the spring semester, what's been the focus of the athletic department?
Yeah, I think initially, as you alluded to, was really, kind of understanding the enormity, of course, for the world and the country, first and foremost, relative to this unprecedented pandemic. And then it came down to our level, and understanding the loss of our student athletes and their spring seasons, and the difficulties that posed. And so initially it was trying to be communicative and make sure that everybody understood, which they intuitively did, I think. And then quickly it turned to planning and what next. And there was all kinds of logistical issues relative to all of us going from a place where we saw each other every day to where we didn't see anybody in person ever. And so those logistics were important right away. But then, as I mentioned, it's gone to planning. First, for the remainder of the spring term, just as we talked about, how do we keep our students and student athletes engaged. And then it went quickly to the summer term. And what are we going to do with our off-season classes? And then shortly and thereafter, and we're still heavily engaged in fall term planning, of course, within the auspices of our district, of our California Community College system, and trying to parcel out what could possibly happen with athletics, and carrying on with the multitude of conversations and meetings and planning sessions to try to figure it out. And first and foremost, again, I'm going to be repeating this throughout, keeping our student athletes engaged, keeping them motivated, keeping their eye on the prize of their academic well-being, number one, and then wading through all of the information and the challenges to see what can be done athletically.
No, that's great. And then I know we've seen and had some conversations ourselves with regards to the recent announcement. I think we're probably about 3 weeks or so removed from the California Collegiate Athletic Association, the 2CAA, which includes Chico State, Cal State East Bay, Monterey Bay. That association, they've already come out and suspended their fall sports. So how much pressure does that put into the California community colleges with regards to planning or even following suit potentially with that announcement?
Well, I think you're right, Steve. It was, I think, initially difficult because from my perspective, I want to keep hope alive as long as we possibly can. And so when they came out with that announcement, still 3+ months away from the start of the fall term, frankly, it was a trend that I didn't want to see continue. Obviously, they had upper administration in the California CSU system that made the decision, and then athletics followed. My position, and I think it's been borne out, certainly not alone with many others, is to be logical and rational and have safety first above all else, but also not to be too rash or too quick with making a decision to pull the plug. If we can't do it, we're going to wait as long as we possibly can before we make those decisions.
Great. Yeah, and I know that there was a recent announcement with regards to what the 3C2AR Association has done in California. We'll talk a little bit about that here a little bit down the road, but appreciate you kind of giving some insight into that as well. So how concerned are you as the Dean of KHA as well as the Athletic Director with regards to fall sports and what it would mean to Sac City specifically if we're not able to play fall sports?
I am concerned that we won't be able to have athletics in the fall. However, I am also encouraged that we collectively are doing all we can to keep that possibility alive. But more importantly, I think, is what I would consider a long view. And we know the impact of athletics on our student athletes statewide and at Sac City, where student athletes, one could argue, are the most successful student cohort in the history of the California Community College system in terms of their academic performance and their academic marks and transfer and all of those important categories. And of course, in this time, with the events of the last 2 weeks, we serve a disproportionately impacted population. Approximately 75% of our student athletes are from disproportionately impacted population. So I've been heartened by the response from our system, collectively that athletics is important. It's important on one level for allowing competition, but much, much more important than that is the benefits to our student athletes. So yes, I'm concerned about potentially not being able to participate in fall athletics, but I'm also heartened and encouraged that athletics has such a primary position in our system, and we're taking the long view, and we're going to keep our students engaged. We're going to keep their eye on the prize relative to their academic progress, and be prepared to come back on ground and participate in athletics if and when we can.
Great. Yeah. And I know a lot of coaches have been engaged with their student athletes, doing the Zoom stuff, same as we are right now, checking in with them individually as well as in group settings. And that's a piece that's often sometimes overlooked with, the spring classes going online. Athletics has kind of followed suit as well. So appreciate that insight. We know, and everyone out there listening knows that, things are changing by the minute. There's obviously a phased approach in California that Governor Newsom has been following, and we're staying closely aligned to. But with all the constant changes and uncertainty and no one really knowing what the future holds, there's so many unknowns in terms of how we're, trying to proceed forward. How do you keep your coaches engaged in terms of the message, and what is it that you say to your coaches and staff during this time?
Well, primarily, from my perspective, the message is we need to be prepared and we need to be optimistic. And I think we need to do all we can, again, to prepare ourselves, prepare our student athletes. We need to be optimistic, but again, we need to maintain the long view. But that engagement, again, has really been, great to see on some level. You hate to have it occur in these circumstances, but as we saw the other day when our football coaches, Danny Walker and John Hurley, gave a Zoom clinic relative to what they've been doing with their student athletes, where they're meeting at a particular time via Zoom and breaking out into positions. But the level of technology and education is just off the charts. Steve, I think you'd agree with kind of that tack to be taken. So the message is it's a challenge, but it's temporary. And we have bigger goals that we have to keep our eye on the prize relative to the individual student athlete development and academic well-being. And we have to keep pushing that mantra. It's not a tough sell, but that's our mission at this point.
Yeah, and it's probably, to tie it back into sports, it's kind of the analogy of, take a football program, like you said, with Coach Walker, Coach Hurley. They prepare all week. They have their one game during season, either Friday night or Saturday. And, they have a scheme going into that game. And, now their opponent has changed stuff that they've done on film or traditionally done. And, the coaches, they don't have the luxury of preparing their players anymore. They got to implement, plan B, which should have already been prepared. So similar to kind of what they're doing with, their Zoom tactics and how they're changing their approach of coaching and keeping their student athletes engaged is very similar to that. They lined up in a different defensive front. We got to go to the audible. So it's just another thing in their playbook and their arsenal, if you will.
Yeah. Now it's a good point. And that's, one of the great things about athletics and all our coaches and all of our staff. You think about, okay, I mean, I guess we could roll over and just kind of say, be worried or be this or that. And certainly, we understand the concerns, we understand the safety issues, and we're going to take every possible precaution. But we're also going to be proactive, and that's what we need to be. And again, being prepared, being optimistic, and with the kind of people we have at Sac City, it's an easy thing to do and to be genuine for our student athletes, and to know at the end of the day that's how we're measured and how well they succeed.
Completely agree. And we talked about earlier, with spring cancellation and from the outside looking in, people might be questioning, what's the department doing? What are the coaches doing? What are you specifically doing? And so to that end, obviously your role and your time spent has been, carved out for one area going into competition. That gets turned upside down, and now you're, into this different realm that you didn't anticipate. None of us did. So speak to me a little bit about the planning sessions that you've been a part of, and whether that's internally at Sac City College with our district, Los Rios, or even with the Big 8 conference or the 3C2A.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about this with maybe people that aren't familiar with collegiate systems or our California community college system in general, but we are certainly based on the concept of access and input from a wide variety of constituents. And in my positions, one of the great things about the job I have is the exposure and connections I have to people from all over the state. Certainly at our district level, we're 4 colleges within a Los Rios Community College district. There's 4 colleges that sponsor athletics. I've been heavily involved from the start with my colleagues at the other 3 institutions, heavily involved with our district personnel and our vice chancellor of instruction and education in terms of setting the parameters for us. Certainly with goes without saying, maybe all of our coaches and the conversations I mentioned, both formal and informal, all of our staff, all of whom have questions relative to what's going to happen next. Our upper administration with President Gutierrez, Vice Presidents Garcia, Brown, and Bray, all with big lifts during these last 3 months to try to shift an institution of 20,000 students all online in 3 days, and then start the planning process. So certainly with all of those people at the statewide level, heavily involved with our Big 8 conference in terms of planning. There's planning documents for each of the sports. Moving forward, heavily involved with the Athletic Trainers Association, as you might imagine, with our own district athletic trainers, heavily involved with commissioners, my colleague dean athletic directors across the state, where we wrote up a white paper to really kind of put on paper the incredible benefits of athletics at the community college level, and certainly involved most recently in the last 3-4 weeks with the 3C2A board activity, and being on top of that, communicating with the 3C2A interim executive director Jennifer Cardone. So this time of year, traditionally in the past, has been a little bit of a breath of air after the 9 or 10 months of competition, and that is anything but the case now. But it's a great energy, again, trying to do all we possibly can, but a lot of planning, a lot of conversations, and I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of the number of people that I've been in communications with, and I know our coaches with their coaches associations, our staff members across the board have all been engaged in similar communications.
No, it does, and I think it goes back to, a previous more normal time, I guess, if you will, where, you know, having to go into, the office on a Saturday and then spend, 6 hours covering an event, seems like a cakewalk at this point compared to some of the meetings and stuff. You're being pulled in obviously several different directions, and we appreciate that from a college standpoint, and I'm sure from an association standpoint at the larger scale, everything that you're doing for Sac City Panther athletics, and that's coaching staff, as well as student athletes. So thank you. Um, Kind of going into, we're Memorial Day is in the rearview mirror. That's traditionally the end of our athletic season for the spring, culminating with the baseball state championships. So summer's not too far off, but for most of us, Memorial Day signifies the unofficial start of summer. So what's your primary focus been these past few months? And now that we're, through the spring season, looking into the summer months and preparing for the fall and next spring?
Yeah. Well, in terms of athletics in particular, of course, it's really been about the status of our courses initially. So we went all online in the spring, and like we said, like that, the seasons were over and we're all online. And so the next round of classes are summer off-season classes, and how we were going to be able to run those. They're going to be online again, which they are. What would we do with the medical clearance, as the summer is the start of our medical clearance year, I guess, for lack of a better term, and our athletic trainers, Michael Kaufman, Daniel Romero, and Tamara Poole, have been great in terms of those preparations. But trying to get a gauge on what that would look like, and if there's any possibility that we could go on ground. Conversations with district and college personnel relative to our ability to do that and what it would take. And then very much entwined is what the fall schedule would look like. And is that initially the district had decided that there would be on-ground classes, and of course our athletics courses were included in that. Then it's been decided that it's all online. So now, with us being a potential exception, if conditions are able to do that. And then what happens if we're not able to participate in athletics? Are we still able to keep our classes? Are we still able to keep those athletic courses so that we can maintain the engagement with student athletes? And I'm very happy to say the answer has been yes. And I think there is support for doing all of those things. So, those items, generally speaking, and the mountain of communications that go along with those plans, which again, I'm feel fortunate to have the energy and the people around me and around us in Sac City that I do, because those are, while sometimes difficult conversations, they're also in depth and come from a great place of love for athletics and for our student athletes. So I've definitely had enough to keep me busy, Steve. That's for sure.
No, absolutely. And it sounds like I understand that last Friday, some potential plans have been approved by the 3C2A with regards to athletics for fall 2020 and spring 2021. So can you share a little bit about those plans and what your message is to the staff and student athletes as they look to understand what the future holds?
Yeah. Essentially, the plans have been, have been narrowed down to three main plans, and this was over a couple 3-week period that they evolved. So the final plan that was approved by the board essentially is going to have plans that coalesce or are aligned with the state's opening stages. And so the conventional plan, as it's being called, or the Plan A, you might say. From now until July 17th, we have a schedule that has all the fall sports occurring in the fall, spring sports occurring in the spring. There's a later start date for the fall sports, pushed back to August 31st for practice start date, with all sports ending before Thanksgiving. There's a 25% cut to contests in that plan. There's no state championship, but there's still an allowance for regional championships, so Northern California championships for us. And so that plan is the one that's in place now. However, if on July 17 there is not an opening up of the state to potentially say stage 4 that would allow for athletics, then the second plan kicks into effect, which moves a couple spring sports into the fall, essentially strives to have the fall seasons for those sports that are termed as non-contact. Women's golf, cross country, swimming would be moved from the spring to the fall. And then I don't have the date in front of me here, Steve. Let me see the going to, yes. So then that second plan that I just mentioned would be in effect until August 17th. On August 17th, if we are not in a position to participate in those contests, then we'd go to what would be the last plan, or termed the Plan D, I guess is what that plan is. But basically that moves all sports to the spring term moves all sports to the spring term. And that, again, I think makes sense in terms of the progression, makes sense in terms of keeping hope alive as long as we possibly can. Again, safety and security of our student athletes, and the state has 20,000 plus student athletes. We've got 450 plus student athletes at Sac City. So the task of ensuring the safety of those students and student athletes, something that absolutely is taken seriously. And if we have to push back, then that's what the plan allows for.
No, and that's great. And I appreciate you giving some insight. If nothing else, having those established dates, gives obviously something for the coaches and more specifically the student athletes to look forward to, and really understand once we get to this deadline, we're automatically flipping to the next plan if we can enact that plan. So I think it's, just speaks testament to what you've done in terms of Sacramento City College, but also, collectively across the state, what the athletic directors, the administrators have done and work with the 3C2AR Association to ensure that, athletics will come back in some shape or form, whether that is in the fall semester or in the spring semester based on those given plans. So appreciate that insight.
No, you bet, Steve, and obviously appreciate everything that you've been doing as well. And we got to be prepared, got to be optimistic.
Yep. So I appreciate you taking the time with me today, Mitch. For those of you that haven't seen the white paper that Mitch alluded to earlier, that is on our website, SCC-Panthers.com. It was posted May 31st, so it's right there rotating in our headlines on our main page. For anything else related to Sac City Athletics, feel free to get out there. SCC-Panthers.com is our website. Mitch, any closing thoughts before I let you go?
I think the message, as you summed up, to our current student athletes or our prospective student athletes, to anybody interested in community college athletics, and certainly Sacramento City College athletics, is that we are looking forward. and we're going to deal with this as best we can, as safely as we can. The strength of our coaching staff, of our people, and again, taking the long view that we know the importance of athletics, and we're going to do all we can to make it happen this year. If it doesn't, then we're going to do all we can to keep our student athletes engaged academically and on a pace to succeed academically, to transfer, and to do all those things that we know are of value to them and to us. So we're going to be careful. We're going to be safe, but we're also going to be proactive. So thanks very much, Steve, for the time, and thanks to everybody out there.
Nope. And just to close, hope everyone again is staying healthy and safe during this time. And we look forward to seeing you back at a Panthers sporting event in the fall or spring semester. Take care.
Thank you.